Hello, hello. Heather Jean here, Confidence Through Cabaret, the podcast. If you're listening to this, you can also see this on the vodcast, which is on the Confidence Through Cabaret YouTube channel under the vodcast playlist. If you're watching this, then of course you can get the audio version anywhere you get your podcasts. Just search Confidence Through Cabaret and you'll find us. So, welcome for today. And we are talking all about managing your inner critic. So I do a huge amount of work around imposter voice and overcoming your imposter voice. And in this edition, I wanted to just talk about that inner critic a little bit more because I realized I was doing a little bit of editing and updating of the show notes over the weekend, and I realized that I haven't really talked about this in the podcast. And so I wanted to share some insight and tips from my experience about managing your inner critic and or your imposter voice. I don't talk about imposter syndrome very often because I think it gives it too much importance, and it almost kind of gives us a label that says, oh, well, I've got imposter syndrome, so I can't do those things. And that's not true. It might be true that you have imposter syndrome, but it's not true that should prevent you, or that's necessarily going to prevent you from doing things, or form as a label that kind of explains why you're not doing things. So let's talk a little bit more about the inner critic. So for those of you I haven't met before, I'm Heather Jean. Hello. And I help women to build unshakable confidence and to really be able to reconnect with our body as it is. Whether it's how you want it to be or not isn't the point. It's about accepting your body for where it is and what it's like, and it's about appreciating, having genuine gratitude for how your body supports you. Um, it's also about connecting with our mindset. And that's where this inner critic voice comes in. And we're going to talk a lot about the voices in our heads. So, that mind body connection. And I say this very often, what we experience in our mind. So it starts with a thought and we give it emotion and it gets momentum. And that creates a physiological response, shallower breathing, increased heart rate, pupil dilation, all kinds of things. Some of them you'll be less aware of than others, but it creates as if that is happening, as if it's real. And so what tends to happen is that then gets a cycle going with our thoughts, and then we start to really engage in those thoughts more, and vice versa. So sometimes we feel stress in our body and we're maybe tensing our shoulders or clenching our fists or our jaws or our toes, or wherever you kind of experience that clench, and that can create or generate thoughts. And so it's a very related thing. And what I do is help women to be able to take back control of that cycle, and to be able to accept and appreciate the body for how it is and who it is, and then work with the mindset. And sometimes we start with the opposite way, with the mindset, and then work into the body. So all of my programs include body work and movement that's unchoreographed, that just allows our body to move with our mind switched off. And so all of my programs, kind of have one night a week of that body movement, and one night a week of, kind of input and discussion and experiences. So I do programs about love the skin that you're in. I do programs about body confidence and building strategies to gaining more confidence, because confidence is a momentum. And I talk about this every time, that we all have highs and lows, and when we have that momentum, our lows aren't as low and we don't stay down as long, because it goes back up quite quickly. It's a bit like a roller coaster. It dips down and has the momentum to go back up to the highest heights, and to continue to build even higher. So let's talk a little bit about our voices in our head. So most of us have some sort of an inner critic, whether that's a more extreme version in terms of our imposter voice, or whether that's just our voice, that talks to us like a toxic best friend in our head that goes, "Oh, way to go, that was so stupid," or "You'll never be able to do that," or whatever it is that your inner critic says to you, or picks out only the mistakes. You'll be maybe reading something you've written, and you'll just see almost like a spotlight onto those words that are errors or not quite right, and that can be advantageous as well, because obviously that helps us with editing, and that helps us to be able to improve and grow. But it's all about how you look at it. So we all have that inner voice that is critical. uh, and when we hear that word critical, we often think of, oh, that's going to be so negative. It's critiques, right? And that's what allows us to grow. So it's all in how you look at it. Some of us have an imposter voice, and the imposter voice um, is a stronger version of that. Is part of what feels like our identity if we don't get a handle on it, and that's where we fail to internalize our successes. That's where we've had successes and we've had failures, but we focus on those failures, we highlight those failures, and then we give the definition of failure as, again, something negative. Now, some of that is reinforced in how you were raised, so, with your parents or carers, and your family and your best friends around you, and your teachers in school have a lot to play in that, where what is praised is that you're clever or funny or accurate, or can score goals or whatever it is. And so what you were praised for is that reinforcement of doing those things more. And then what you were criticized for is what you things that you might find difficult, or things that you might find that you want to improve on. And we often will focus on those negatives, and when we have imposter syndrome, we mainly focus on those negatives. So I'm actually really conscious of the gestures that I'm using now, because last week we talked about confidence on camera with the amazing Adrian Spencer, and in the Confidence with Coffee segment, which is the segment where I take up a piece of the podcast or vodcast episode and I expand on it a little bit more. Last week I expanded on the use of gestures and how it helps us to access our information, and I'm acutely aware of my gestures now, having talked about that, and now being on camera again. So just letting you know what's going on in my mind. And you see, what we feel is not what other people see or experience. So before I pointed that out, you didn't see that. Now I'm seeing that. I'm like, oh, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Don't touch your head. Don't move your hands. That might be going on inside of my head. But of course, when we're connecting with an audience, then they're not aware of those kind of thoughts. So worth bearing in mind that we are more critical of ourselves than others ever will be. So another voice in our head besides the inner critic, possibly an imposter voice, is that voice that is our intuition. And when we tap into the feminine energy, which is about feeling, creativity, intuition, gratitude and grace, then we hear a different voice. Now, the thing is, our inner critic is very often louder than our intuition, because our intuition usually is a whisper, and sometimes it's a little bit stronger than that, but we can very easily drown it out with our inner critic, which is very related to our ego. So anytime that you are judging yourself and or others or circumstances, anytime that you are talking about, actual physical things, we are in, material things, we are in our ego. And when we let that go, then we can start to tap into our intuition. And so it is important that we have the masculine energy that is about, correcting mistakes, that is about, achieving results, that is about, driving and competing. But it also is important that we can control and quiet that down, so that we can hear our intuition, so that we can hear what we feel, so that we can hear our desires, because that's what's going to keep us on the path of our most positive passion. And so if you needed any reasons for quieting your inner critic, other than, it's driving you crazy and it stops you from doing things, or it, criticizes you when you do things, then that tuning into that intuition is especially important, because that's where you can find your true passion. So Another voice that we talk a lot about in Confidence Through Cabaret is your stage voice. Now, I ask all of my guests every week to tell me about what kind of cabaret performance they would do in a small venue with a relatively small audience. Maybe they would be singing or dancing or performing burlesque or doing some sort of aerial or contortion or circus kind of skills, or maybe they would be doing stand-up comedy or a combination of things. And I always ask them what would they be doing so they can start to get into that state of mind of, yes, I might be singing. And then I ask them about what kind of prop they would want. And that is so that they can think, oh, maybe I would have a hat. So I have something to do. I have something, some way to move. I have some way to hide. I have some way to express or exaggerate certain parts of the performance. And then the third thing that I ask them, and this is where I'm ultimately going in the first two questions, is towards how would they be introduced on stage and coming up with a stage name. Now, I try to push that stage name out of my guests so that they come up with it quite quickly. Because if you start overthinking it and you start being really clever and you start saying, what's a clever play on words and what would sound cool and so on, that's fine if you were going to be in a stage performance, you might want to go that far into your thinking. But it is much more about who is your stage person in your head, even if you're not going on stage. So that stage presence of being the fabulous or the queen or the, glamorous or, uh, you know, a magnificent diva or whatever it is, then that is what another voice that you can tune into in your head. And that is fierce, powerful, strong, certain, capable, passionate. And that is something else that you can tap into. Now, all of these are good resources for us when we need them. And so when we tap into that stage voice, mine is also Helen. So Helen is a historical thing for lots of reasons. That's a name that just goes back and has kind of stayed with me. But instead of being Helen back, which is what I used to be about the story that I would tell about the anguish of my past, I wanted to move past that. And so I moved into also Helen because there's a lot of different ways that you can say that. There's a lot of, I like anything that has kind of different personalities when you put different emphasis on the word. So my thinking is that I am strong. I am also passionate. I am also fierce. I am also capable. I am also anything that I want to be. And I do use this genuinely throughout any day. If I'm trying to do something, let's say I'm even trying to carry heavy groceries and I'm thinking, oh, I just don't have the strength for this today. Then I go, no, I'm also Helen. I am fierce. I am strong. I can carry these. And all of a sudden, because our mind and body is so connected, I have that adrenaline and that momentum that takes me through something. If I have to make a phone call that I'm going to find difficult, then I'll say, no, I am also Helen, and she is badass, and she makes this call and she gets through it the best way possible. So it's that being able to tune into that. And that voice, when we tap into it, is stronger, louder, and more positive than our inner critic that's going, no, you can't, no, you shouldn't, no, look at last time, or what could happen if, and this strong, passionate persona of my stage name is far greater than my inner critic. I still allow my inner critic, my imposter voice, even when I need it the most. So if I hear that imposter voice, to say I'm a soloist in imposter syndrome, I don't like to ask for or accept help, even when it's offered or even when I need it. So I tap into that voice, and to get to know my true self, I can start to explore. I'm hearing this. Don't ask for help. They're going to think you're weak. Don't ask for help. They're going to think that you're, pathetic or whatever the words are. Um, then I can start to explore that a little bit more. What is that voice telling me? What is the fear behind that? What is the worst case scenario? And what would happen if that happened? Can I live with that? And I can start to delve down into that a little bit more deeply. And that is a wonderful gift because my inner critic is there, or my imposter voice is there to protect me from, dangers that and things that I fear. And so being able to have that is when I have the capacity and the bandwidth for it, I can start to um, dive into, where is that fear coming from? And is that fear serving me? Does it come from a belief that I had in my past? Is it something that I was told when I was younger and it was reinforced and reinforced? Because our beliefs come from what we affirm to ourselves. So our beliefs come from what we say to ourselves over and over. For example, I often use this one because it has haunted me for a long time, which is that I'm impatient. My mother told me I'm impatient all the time. Another one is that I talk too much. My teachers told me that I talk too much, and thank you, teachers, because I do talk too much, and I have made a very large living off of that for all of my adult life, talking too much. So that's been fantastic. So thanks for reinforcing that. But I put a different spin on it. Do you see? Rather than, oh, I talk too much. I should be quiet. I shouldn't say anything. And I lived that way for a very long time. I now go, yeah, I talk too much. And you know what? That means I express myself. You know what? That means I know what I want to say. That means that I know my message. And so we can put a different spin on what that means when we start to dive a little bit deeper into those affirmations that have become our beliefs. So when I start to think about, my inner critic, or my imposter. And by the way, there are kind of archetypes in the imposter syndrome. There's the soloist that I've mentioned that prefers to do things on their own, even if they're struggling. There is the natural genius. The natural genius expects that they're going to be able to pick things up like that right away, and if they can't, then they don't choose to do it because that makes them feel some sense of failure. There's also the perfectionist, and the perfectionist has to do things to their standards, which are incredibly high, sometimes impossibly high. And if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right. And sometimes when we have that perfectionist tendency, then our perfectionist standards are much higher than the standards. So you understand there's kind of standards of doing something. For example, when I set up a stage for an event, there's the standard of how it should be. And then there's my standard, which is impossibly high, that the whole stage would be polished first or not polished first if it makes it slippery, or whatever it is. And so the standard is what I should be aiming for, but I'm often, far above that into my standard. So perfectionism can stop us from doing things. If it's not going to be perfect, then we can very often give up and say, do you know what? It's not going to be good enough. Um, and so you can start again to dive down into some of those beliefs that come from your imposter archetype. For example, what makes you think that it's not good enough? What tells you that? How do you know that? Is it true? And you can start to really ask those questions. That's what I do with my coaching clients a lot. Another of the archetypes in the imposter voice is about superheroes, and superheroes will often want to take on all the roles, so many roles that they add too much and unnecessary pressure. And so a little bit like the soloist, they often won't ask for help, but even if they have help, they take on those roles because they have to be everybody's superhero, and they attempt to be all things to all people all the time, which is again an impossibly high standard. And then the fifth archetype in imposter syndrome, which we talk about a lot, is the expert. And so the expert is somebody who needs all of the badges, needs the certificate. I'm a qualified coach, I have 30 years of experience, but I need this course, and then when I have that course, then it's still not enough, and I need more, and I need more. And I need to be the smartest person in any room. I have to have all of the information, and so we exhaust ourselves. That again, if you reframe that and you look at what's behind that. For example, if I'm going into a corporate conference that I'm running, I will have at least 3 days of material for every one day that I do. And what that allows me to do is be able to say, oh, this isn't working so well, or the group went off this way. So here's a different way to look at it, or here's another exercise, or here's a different thing that we need to discuss. And that comes from my preparation. So sometimes these archetypes can be helpful for us, but it is worth doing the work to get to what's behind that. Why do you feel that you're not qualified? Why do you feel that it's not enough? Why do you feel that the not meeting the standards is not worth doing at all? um, and that comes down to questioning things like our definition of failure. um, so failure seems like the end of the line. I failed, that's it. It can't be redone. I can't relive that past. Um, and no, that's true. But how you look at failure, whether you define it as, the negativity that many of us give it, or whether you look at it as failure was simply a case of I did not have all of the information available to me at the time of that performance or that, delivery. Um, and now I have that, because hindsight's wonderful. I have that information. And so I failed to have that information. Maybe I should have. Maybe I could never have had that information until I went through that experience. But now, with this hindsight and this experience, I can move forward and be even better. And so failure is not necessarily a negative word. And so when I say do the work behind things, I'm talking about, you know, really kind of checking in with what's your definition, what's your belief, what's your affirmations that you've been saying to yourself that maybe others were saying to you, that you're affirming to yourself daily. And, that imposter voice, or that inner critic, it's important to remember that that is there to protect us and to propel us forward. So when we put a positive spin on that, then that's when we can really get, a lot of value, a lot of learning, a lot of growth, a lot of even redirection to finding the path that we want to be on, or adjustment to the path that we are on. Um, so the next thing that I wanted to talk about, and I've got some notes here, is really thinking about with your inner critic. Are you comparing yourself to others? So, if you're comparing yourself to others, or in fact competing with others, then that inner critic is going to be, in its element, because your ego is there. I'm winning, or I'm not winning, or I need to change these things to win, or whatever it is. And so I would say, do your inner work, and then find your place to follow your path. And what others are doing, what others are thinking, what others are judging is not your problem. And so that can be really hard to let go. That's a lot of work. I've done that work hugely for myself, and I that's one of the things that comes up most often with my clients as well, is just that, letting go of the need to compare yourself to others or compete with others. And if I give you an example in my own personal life, we because a lot of you will know, as well as burlesque, I also do pole and aerial. Um, and a lot of times people will say, in a at a pole class, they'll say, how long have you been doing this? And I'll say, that's irrelevant. Because it doesn't say, did I have a break? Maybe I had an injury or something, or maybe I had a break over COVID, or maybe I just had a break because I didn't want to do it for a while. Um, doesn't take into account. So I could say, I've been doing this for 5 years. I haven't, because I had a whole year off. Um, it also doesn't take into account where I started from. So I started with somebody at a very similar time, who came from doing trapeze, right? And I came from doing nothing. So to compare ourselves 3 years later is kind of like her initial journey was like this, and mine was like this very slow rise. So you can't compare the two. The other thing that will happen often is that people will say, in that, how long have you been doing it? Then, what can you do? Like, can you do this particular inversion? That's just lifting your feet up over your head onto to grasping the pole, or even being away from the pole in a balance. So and then people will say, well, can you do this and can you do that? Well, part of that depends on my flexibility, which is hugely part of how much do I work on my flexibility. It's also hugely part of my DNA. I was very blessed with over flexibility. So hypermobile, and so some of the moves have nothing to do with how long I've been doing it, because there are some real expert pole dancers who can't do some very basic moves because their body doesn't twist in that kind of way yet. And that's the key thing, is it's a yet. If you really want to master something, that it's not there yet. It's not there yet. It's not that it's never going to be there. It's not that, oh, that's such a basic move, why can't I do this. It's not there yet. And that allows room for growth, and that allows room for more momentum. So stop comparing yourself. Don't allow your inner critic to compare and compete with other people. um, put out your offering and share that with the world, and that is competition. I mean, that's ultimately what businesses should be doing. So the other thing I would say is, and I should have said this earlier actually, is to name your inner critic. I have except for my intuition, I have names for all of them. So we've talked about naming your stage name. Name your inner critic. If you have a more extreme imposter voice with one or all of the, or a combination of the five archetypes that I explained, then name that. So that's this noise in your head. And if you name it, then you can talk to it as another identity. So I've said this many times. Mine is Donald, because I made mine into a cartoon duck, and it's like whack, 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 whack. And so then I can sort of go, okay, Donald, you need to slow down. Let's have a look at this. Okay, Donald, I've got this. You can quiet for a little while, and then I can start to tune into my other voices. Maybe it's my stage voice, maybe it's my inner knowing, maybe it's who I genuinely am. But when you talk to it as another voice, just as your stage voice. Okay, Helen, we got this. We can carry these groceries. Okay, Donald, I've got this. I don't need to be afraid of this, or I'm going to do it anyway. Thanks very much for that warning, for trying to keep me safe, but I'm okay. So we talk to it with compassion. Sometimes I talk to my inner critic with almost gunfire voices. And I know that sounds really strange, but I'll go, okay, Donald, stop. Okay, thank you, stop. Okay, and if it won't, I'll just be like, Donald, stop. If it still carries on, then I make like a rifle noise, and like just kind of stop. It's like a very sharp noise in my head. So you can try that. I learned that from the amazing Richard Bandler, who is one of the grandfathers of neurolinguistic programming. Along with Grinder, they identified and made famous the NLP concepts that we know today. Richard Bandler said, make a noise that's like, that. And so that goes on in my head in a sense. So name your inner critic, talk to your inner critic, and then stop comparing yourself and competing with others. And then the other thing to do there is to be able to recognize your success and celebrate that. So for example, if you were making a difficult call, maybe you were making a sales call, and it was, it was scary, or you were thinking, oh, I'm never going to be able to do this. They're not going to want it. They're not going to buy. Then you can say, okay, Donald, or whatever you've named your inner critic, your imposter voice. And you can say, thank you for that. I'm going to do this. So let me check a few things. And that's where then it quietens down Donald, because you can't have all the voices going at once. They're not simultaneous. It's not possible for them to all be talking at once. So then I can say, first of all, is it true? Is what Donald is saying to me true? The other thing that I can say is, what is it that Donald is warning me of? So where is that fear coming from? What am I affirming to myself? And I can change the affirmation. I can choose a different affirmation. I can choose I am strong and capable. I am likable, and I know what I'm doing. I'm doing my absolute best, and I'm getting better every day. Those positive affirmations stated in the present, and those will tune us into a different voice. Now, when we do that and we make the sales call, let's say, if that's what we're doing, then we celebrate the success. And even if it didn't go how you wanted, or you didn't get the sale, or they said, I'm going to call you back, or whatever it is, then you can say, I made the call and celebrate that. I did these things well. I was friendly. I was knowledgeable. I, offered the sale, because for some of us, even offering it is difficult. And what will happen is your inner critic will want to go, yeah, but you offered it too soon, and you should have asked this, and you should have pushed more, and you should. It's like, then you can quieten that down and say, okay, but Donald, I'm celebrating right now. I'm making a list of the things that were successful, that I did, that I can celebrate. Because as I said to you at the beginning, that the imposter syndrome is a failure to internalize our successes in comparison to our failures. And if we allow those, yeah, but I didn't do these and I didn't do these, then we're reinforcing and affirming all of the things that we should be afraid of. And the next time we go to make a sales call, guess what happens? It's that. So it's really about kind of putting some perspective into what is successful and what you can celebrate. And never mind that so and so would have done that, because we're no longer comparing. And never mind what Donald is telling you. Yes, you can acknowledge those things, and you can say, okay, Donald's telling me that I should have learned, I should have offered the sale sooner, or I should have offered the sale in a different way. Is that true? Well, yes, here's a better way to do it. And then affirm that to yourself. So that's where you go into the next state, and you go into it in positive. I failed to do that last time, remember, because I didn't have that knowledge. And now I have this knowledge, and I'm going to do it, and the next time. And then of course, if the next time you do exactly the same thing, then your inner critic is going to go, yeah, no, I see, you did it again, I told you, see, you always do this. Okay, well, first of all, always, is that true? Like, question generalizations. Always, never, even usually, question those things. Is that always true? Is it never true? Really kind of start to question the generalizations that you use for your own performance. Now, when you do that, then you can start to say, well, no, because it was the one time when I did it really well. Great. So there's an exception. So it's no longer true that it was always. And so that means if I've done it once before, or a couple times before, then I can do that again. And then when you do your next sales call, or whatever it is that you're doing, then you try, and then you can celebrate that and say, I celebrate that I did it, or I celebrate that I recognize what I need to improve for the next time. So there's always something to celebrate in terms of successes. Um, Another thing that you can do, if this is going more into the imposter syndrome and more extreme, then you can list the reasons why you can do it, why it is possible for this to work. And anytime that you have a yeah but, then shut that down. Donald, thanks for that warning. I'm just focusing on what I can do right now, or what is possible, or why that can work. And so you can really start to reinforce what is possible. And if you want to, you can make a physical list, because that will help you go, I have actually quite a long list here. I have some really good stuff here of reasons why I can do it. And sometimes that is about transferring skills. So, for example, maybe you are planning and organizing something. Then think about all the times when you have planned and organized well, or what you learned from planning and organizing in the past that you can bring to it. Whether that's, it didn't go well, and now I'm going to improve it, and I know how to improve it, because I've learned from my experience, or I've asked for advice, or I've done some research. And so we go into that next thing in possibilities. Okay. Something else that I wanted to share with you as a tip is relearning your failure. So, if you've just come off of a sales call, for example, and it hasn't gone well, spend a moment. I actually talked about this a little bit on Confidence on Camera as well last week with Adrian. Um, Go back over that situation and replay it in your head, as if it went perfect, as if you made the shot or you asked for the sale or you did the thing exactly as you would want to. It went to you just in an inspired, ideal way. And when you do that, then you can start to, relearn it and reprogram it as a positive. And that's called acting as if in the neurolinguistic programming or NLP world. So we act as if that went perfect. And then the next time we go into that sales call or face that situation, we act as if it went how you've rehearsed it into your own mind, because you're enforcing those neuro pathways. Something else that I wanted to look at a little bit in terms of managing your inner critic is around procrastination. So, procrastination is something that might be coming up from your imposter. For example, it's not going to be perfect, so let's put that off, or let's not do that. It might be something that is very fear based that you haven't looked into yet. You're just shutting it down because it's fear. You have that fear. And what you can do for your procrastination is look to your future self. So say again, for example, if you're making a sales call or whatever it is, then you run it through in your mind as if it's already happened in the ideal way. You visualize all the things that you're doing, thinking, experiencing, seeing, hearing, taste, touch, smell, all of the senses. Visualize that going perfectly, going exactly as you want it to. And then it's a lot like, replaying the past. But if you haven't faced one yet, maybe this is your first time or first time since you've come off of something that didn't go how you wanted, then you visualize that into your future. So I've just come off of my call, this is how it's gone, and it's gone exactly right, and you go through it in detail. And that future pacing, that looking to your future self, is really a strong tool, especially if you can close your eyes and visualize it a little bit more. um, the other things for managing your inner critic is around making sure that you're looking after yourself. So every Saturday, I post in Confidence Through Cabaret on the socials, Self Care Saturday. What are you doing to honor you today? So that's about thinking. And we just came off the Spring Clean Challenge, which is the replays are still here on the YouTube channel. If you're here on the YouTube channel under the Spring Clean Challenge playlist, they're also in the Confidence Through Cabaret community. So do join us there on Facebook. And we share share the our outcomes from each of the days of the Spring Clean Challenge in there. So self-care is about kind of thinking about, what does your garden need today? What does it need? Water? Does it need sunshine? Does it need some sort of food? Does it, if you were thinking about your body and mind, what do you need today? And I always refer to it like it's a garden, because then we can think about what fundamental things do we need? What's going on below the surface? What work needs to happen? And how do I cause that garden to bloom? And so really honoring what self-care means and what you most need. And then the other tip that I have for you on managing your inner critic is self-forgiveness. Oh my goodness. So as well as celebrating, then I would do this practice, celebrating, and then I forgive myself for these things. I would do that before the celebration. So I forgive myself for not offering the sale right away. I forgive myself for being a few minutes late onto the call. I forgive myself for the technology not being set up quite right or whatever. I forgive myself for not knowing some of those things. And then you can go into the celebration, or vice versa, or ideally sandwich it with, kind of, here are my successes. Here are the things that I forgive myself for. And here are the things that I commit to myself. So I commit to myself that next time I will know that, I will set that up, I will change that, I will, so go through those successes, go through those forgiveness practices, and then go through the I commit to you the next time, which is again reaffirming your successes. It's a sandwich effectively. Um, and then face the next time as quickly as possible. Face the next time, so you don't have too much time to build it up in your head and for that inner critic to start getting some more momentum. So get started, break it down into small chunks if you need to. So you do the first step. So when I was first learning the podcasting, it was kind of like, how do I use the technology? Oh, I don't know how to use the technology. It's too much. Okay. But I didn't need to know all the technology. I still don't know all the technology over a year later. But what I am doing is breaking it down, and little bit by little bit, I'm getting better at each of the chunks, and I'm taking step by step. So if I wake up and I'm overwhelmed by all the things that need to happen, then I just break that down into, okay, so what's the first thing I need to do? And then I'm in that moment with my first thing that I need to do. I've actually just been coaching somebody on this this week with, okay, so let's identify the steps that are involved. And then let's look at working through each of those steps. So, what's the first thing that needs to happen? And then, what's the next thing that needs to happen? And then, at the end of each step, celebrate and congratulate yourself for tackling that step, getting through that step, forgiveness, commitment, and, for the future, and then next step. And then next step. And they're very small incremental steps. And all of a sudden that adds up. And you'll see, at the end of the day, how satisfied you are with making the steps. Now, your inner critic might go, yeah, but you didn't do the other 10 steps. Well, but I did these steps, right? And so I go through a self-forgiveness process pretty much at the end of every day for all the things that I didn't get done. Um, and what the work that I still need to do is to go back over, why am I overcommitting to myself all of the things that I say I'm going to get done? So what I do is I make a huge to-do list, and then I look at what I can do each day. And that is still too big. I need to look at that, because otherwise I would just be a workaholic um, all of the time, which I enjoy because I enjoy my work. I am fully on the path that is my passion, but I need to look at, rather than having forgiveness practice at the end of each day, kind of for all the things I didn't get done, is just kind of being more realistic. If I know that I have 4 hours of interruptions interspersed throughout the day, then that's 4 hours less that I should plan for. It's not tacking 4 hours onto the end of my day, for example. But those manageable chunks, getting through those, and then celebrating and congratulating yourself. I have a friend that we do that each day. We start off with congratulations for getting a good night's sleep. We work through the day. Congratulations, well done for doing this. Well done for getting so much done at the end of the day. And we remind one another all of the things that we reported to one another that we've got done. Well done. And then we list them for each other. You can do that for yourself, because where your inner critic can be your toxic best friend in your head, you also can have your best friend in your head, and you can name that person as well, that kind, generous, gentle, forgiving, encouraging friend inside of your head. That is another voice, that nurturing parent mode inside of your head. And I would absolutely give that person a name as well. And in fact, that's what I'm going to do some reflection on after I've recorded this episode. Um, so ask yourself what it is that you're trying to avoid. Make sure that you are comfortable with the reasons behind that, and ask yourself why you're trying to avoid that. What is the worst case scenario? I've talked about this earlier, but you can take yourself through that worst case scenario so that you realize that nothing truly bad will happen. So uh, I might take myself through the worst case scenario is they say no. What happens if they say no? Well, then they won't be in my program, or they won't be one of my coaching clients. Okay, what happens if they're not? Well, then I have space for someone else. And just keep going through that. And it's a recognized problem solving tool. It's called the 5 whys. It's also what I refer to as the 2-year-old game, where they go, why? And eventually you end up with, because I said so. But you're probably more patient than me, and you don't do that. But it's that, kind of, when you want to get to root cause of what it is that you're trying to avoid, why is the way to go. Because then you will get to the actual root cause. And then you can ask yourself, is that true? And you can brainstorm those fears. The other thing is beautiful, is that you can say, is this serving me to hold on to this belief or affirm this belief over and over? Is it helpful to me? Is this a strategy that I would teach someone else? Someone that I truly love, let's say it's my children or my friends, would I teach them that strategy? Would I want them to be, unforgiving, to be blaming themselves, to be saying they're not good enough? No, of course not. Why not? And you can go through that wall because it's not nice. And then you can, when you bottom that out, then you'll know that this is how you need to treat yourself as well. And we're back to the self care. Um, and then you can acknowledge that belief. And I would say if there are a lot of beliefs coming up, pick one thing at a time, because just like filling your day with too many things that you'll never get done, filling yourself with trying to solve it all at once is too much. So I would pick one key belief. Maybe it's the fear that they'll say no because they always say no, because they're never going to want what I'm doing, because I'm not enough of an expert, because then you can go back through that, unpick it, go through the whys, understand your fear, check if it's true, decide if it's helpful for you, if it's something that you would teach a loved one, and then you can really start to say, no, it's not something. And I forgive myself for believing that. I forgive myself for acting that way. I celebrate that I've done it well. I've just dropped my notes. I celebrate that I've done it well. I celebrate that I've done that work, and that I can now move on past it, because here is my new belief. And I strongly suggest that, and this is my last point here, is to for you to find affirmations that support it. Now, I have just recently redone my affirmations. I came up with 50 affirmations. I choose the ones that are serving me for the belief that I'm working on in that moment, and I use that affirmation over and over throughout any day, until it's internalized, and then every once in a while it will still pop back up in my head, and I'll say, thank you for that affirmation, and I'll affirm it again. I also have affirmations. You probably can't, maybe if I tilt my camera, if you're watching this, I also have affirmations written all over my wall on post-it notes. And when I sit down in my space to record something, then I see those affirmations and I read out the key ones, and I really close my eyes and focus on them and feel it in body and mind to experience it. So those are some of my key tips. If this has raised anything about your inner critic or imposter voice that you want to work through, I have so much um, admiration for you recognizing it. I am very happy to help you work through it. You can get in touch with me on all of the socials. I am Confidence Through Cabaret on all of the socials except for Twitter. And on Twitter, we are at YBYWYS. I'm also Heather Jean on all of the socials, so you can always send me a Facebook Messenger message. You can drop a message here below. If you are watching this on YouTube, I see the YouTube messages as well. Please like and subscribe while you're here. If you're on podcast and you're listening in audio, then for some of the platforms you can leave comments. It's not as consistent as I'd love it to be. So just jump into Facebook and send me a Facebook Messenger message on Heather Jean or Confidence Through Cabaret. So again, the only place we are not Confidence Through Cabaret is on Twitter. We are at YBYWYS. Please check us out on all of the social platforms. The other place that we are not Confidence Through Cabaret, I am at Heather YBYWYS on Clubhouse. And we have a club which is Confidence and Attitudes Club on Clubhouse as well. So thank you for joining me. I love having you here. Check out the Confidence with Coffee segment. I'll take one piece of this episode and expand a little bit more on that. And that is on the YouTube channel, Confidence Through Cabaret, and it's under the Confidence with Coffee playlist. So those 6 little letters for Twitter and Clubhouse, YB, YWYS, they stand for, it is your body, and it is your world, and it is your stage. So take up space, own it. You deserve it. And you get to choose how you talk to yourself, what you believe, and what you choose in terms of your path of your passion. Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you next Wednesday for another podcast episode. We have the amazing Geneva Livingstone joining us, and we will be sharing a lot about her business and how it's evolved. Thank you again. Bye for now.